My name is Barros. I'm a professor of organization studies here at Grenoble, École management in France. So I study, I'm really interested in alternative organizations and social movements, unions. And the way that I approach this is, and I try to approach all the research is in a relationship with collaboration. So I think the way that I see knowledge is that there's no hierarchy of knowledge. I think so. I don't go to the field thinking that I'm there to teach anyone about anything. I think people on the ground know what the issues are, know what the solutions are, know they've been there for sometimes decades. So I'm there to learn with them, to collaborate with them, to create new knowledge that is applicable for them on the ground, not only academic knowledge. Prefigurative practice in our study are normally practices that are related with local knowledge. So it can be anything from family, agriculture, to local unions, to social movements. So what we study prefigurative practice is how this local knowledge needs to be supported by a structure. So prefigurative practice, the way that we see it in the past is that they created this bubble where you can develop different ideas, radical democracy, radical debate, etc. But what we discovered, particularly working in the Global South, my work in Brazil, is that most of the time when you develop this prefigurative practice, you develop it in a context which is not necessarily friendly to it. It can be actually hostile to this practice. So we try to develop this idea of how prefigurative practice can translate into legal and political tools that actually help them to survive and to thrive. So in this sense, what we thought it was really important is to have what we call arbiters, so knowledge arbiters. So those are people who are legitimate within the community. In our case, we have international judges that work in international court who not only recognize this prefigurative practice and the knowledge that sustains it, but tries to connect this to other kinds of knowledge like scientific knowledge and show that they have like commonalities, that both of them are valuable, but they have common goals, they have common issues that they have to address. And so it's a way to connect them and show how can they work together to create a context that supports this different kind of practice that happen on the ground. So embodiment in our research relates to everything that it's about bodily sensations. So how you feel in a space, how you move in a space, how you relate to space through your body. And what we found is that the body that has become more and more important in thinking about this, particularly in terms of alternative organizations, in organizations that try to do differently within our society. So what we found is that body, in fact, can be a really interesting source of information about the organization, about its practice, and about how its practices are working or not. So the body can be, when you have a body discomfort, when you don't feel well in the space, it can be a really important source of information that something is wrong within the organization. So we try to use this idea of the embodiment of these body sensations as a way to inform decision making, as a way to inform when you want to understand how the organization is evolving or what are the problems around it, that you should pay attention to how people feel in your organization, how they actually experience this in a bodily way, and use this as a source of information to try to understand what is wrong and to develop better practices. So the main takeaway for research of embodiment is basically pay attention to the body. It's pay attention that the body can be a source to show you where which parts of the organization is not working. What are the elements that are affecting people more than you thought? So, and take this body discomfort as a source of information to provide better decision making. And I think this is important for information, important to think about the body, because I think the female membership of alternative organizers are already pretty attuned to the fact that the body matters. But maybe this is not something that the male membership thinks about, because of our, the culture behind being a male in society in general. So it's important that the male membership also tries to understand that the body is important and that it's part of what constitutes our alternatives. So our research on social media, democratic organizations, the basic motivation is that there's kind of these two visions of how these two interact. So in one way, we have people saying that social media can be great in terms of increasing participation, increasing access, more access to knowledge too. And others said that in fact, it just created chaos, that it was a tool that was extremely problematic for democratic organizations. So we try to understand which one in fact was true. When what we find is that there's what we call a process more of monstrification. So monstrification relates to monsters. So for instance, when you have those trolls normally we're seeing this as initially as problematic individuals. So we tend to look at it from the individual side. And what we saw is that these monsters actually, these trolls are created through time, depending on which stage of the process of the democratic process you're looking at. The main takeaway for social media and the relations with democratic organizations is that you have to pay attention when to use it. So there are specific contexts like the mobilization where the social media can be amazing. But there are contexts like debate where social media is problematic because essentially social media has a different idea of what democracy stands for. Social media is not about debates. Social media is much about individual expression, free individual expression, which tends to be not so great to the debate of ideas. So I think I think the contrast between how prefigurative practice happened in the global north and the global south. And the global north, there's this idea that there's a bubble that we take for granted, that there's a safe space where you can experiment with alternatives, which is not the case for the global south. Every time we experiment with alternatives, there's a backlash, there's police violence, there's political pressure. And I think the main takeaway is that you cannot take for granted that you're always going to have this safe space, that you always have the context that supports you. So you have to make sure that you guarantee that you fight for a context, for political, legal context that actually are supportive of you experimenting with different alternatives.